It's visible. Hello.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So it is the third lecture, and we are going to cover the process memory, file, and device management. And it is going to be the second part of this series. As in the first series, we discussed the first two concepts, that was of process management and memory management. Okay. So in this part, we are going to talk about the third and the fourth point finally, and then in the next lecture on Wednesday, we will have a case study. So I'm going to skip the first two parts. Okay. So here we are going to start with the basic idea of file management. Okay. So what do you mean by file management? So first thing comes into mind that when we are saying that we are trying to manage the files, then what is a file? So a file is a basic data structure that is created to store your data in such a fashion so that accordingly you can have access to it whenever it's required. Okay. So this data structure may depend on the type of data that you are trying to store and the best possible way that is feasible for all types of users to access it. Okay. So its a structure might be complex in nature as well as it might be a simple file. So a complex file might be including having pointers to many other files and like that. So its internal data structure will change accordingly. And a simple file is just a collection, a random collection or a sequential or sort of some particular arranged collection of bytes or blocks. Means blocks in the sense I'm saying that a particular memory block. If you want to say that there is a memory word, then multiple words are getting stored in a particular location in a sequential or random fashion, and then that's a particular file structure. So file might be having simple or random sort of data. So random sort of data means it's a simple data. If it's some sort of you can say processed data is available inside a file, then we call it an information. So the basic difference, obviously you are computer guys, so might be knowing the difference between the data and information. Okay. Then what are the possible file types? So a file might be of multiple types, as you know that where there are so many extensions that we use with file names. So normally whenever we name a file, we use put a sort of extension. One is the file name, two sorts of part of a file name. One is the normal file name that is subjected to change and it is dependent on the user's choice. And second is a fixed type. So it will depend on the kind of application that you are using. So if you are using a word processor, then obviously it is kind of a DOC, a doc file or DOCX. And if you are using a text file, then .txt, image file, then .jpg and kind of. Okay. Then we are having different attributes to files. So what kind of attributes we have that when we store a file in operating system, means in memory, and operating system is supposed to manage that memory, then particular attribute of that particular file defines its behavior. When we say that a particular file is read-only, means you cannot write into that file, means your write access is denied. And it is subject to the restrictions when a particular situation is subject to exposure. Means, for example, there are some certain dedicated system files. So obviously the user access is not available there. But what type of user you are, that is also important. So if you are an administrator, then might be the case that you have access to all those files. But if you are a normal user or some sort of guest user, then obviously you are a guest, then you are going to have the minimum possible uh, uh, availability, means in terms of files, in terms of memory, in terms of other access. So all sort of access, whatever you have, the minimum file is guest only. Now, if you are going to be an administrator, obviously you are the superior. Then we are going to talk about some of the operations, what kind of operations that you can have with respect to a particular file. Then you can create a file, you can delete a file, you can modify a file. These are the kind of operations that you can perform on a particular data structure that is known as a particular file. Then there are certain types of locking. Locking means why do you want to have a lock on a file? So when we say the concept came from the real world only, like I told earlier also, whenever you lock a particular door, means it's locked now. only the person who is having the access to key can open it and have access to that particular room. Similar fashion, when you lock a particular file, then the person who is having the key to unlock that particular file is having the information of that particular file. Okay. And there are some other related concepts like how two files can have a shared space and how you can have the pointers from one file to another file and like that. Okay. Then we are going to talk about the access methods. Access methods are going to have the sequential as well as the direct access. Sequential access, again, we are going to talk about starting from the first position, and then in an incremental fashion, you are going to proceed further and you are going to reach the end of the file. In direct fashion, you are going to certainly jump onto a particular location and then you are continue to in a forward way. So whenever you are trying to access a particular location, not from scratch, means not from the beginning, then you are supposed to directly jump onto that particular location. That is possible using means with the help of index also, or you can have some dedicated files that are storing the initial address of that particular block. So we'll discuss about all those things also. Next, we are going to discuss about the file system organization, how a file can be organized. So obviously, when we use a system or laptop, then we usually see that we create folders. So what we call here, folders are the directories, the disk is your memory, that is the secondary storage, and then the file structure. File structure means the basic files. Then the directory structures might be in the form of single or the multi-level, means there are multiple levels and down to 2 level, 3 level, 4 level kind of. And you might have a tree structure. Obviously, a very popular non-linear data structure. Then what is the concept of mounting? Having the discussion of file sharing with a concept of manual sharing, automatic, semi-automatic. Then what are the possibilities of failure? Consistency, what is the role of protection, having the concepts of access list, and finally, what is the importance of creating groups. Okay. In addition to all these things, there are certain other things that we are going to discuss. They're like how file management is interrelated with memory management and how optimal memory management is going to impact the definition of file management. So starting with the first point, as we discussed with that, what is a file and what it is going to be like, a simple or a complex nature. Similarly, what are the different possible types? Now the attributes. So when we say that attributes, then usually if you are using a Linux-based system or you are going to have a normal Ubuntu system, that is a very popular in terms of Linux system. So the desktop version of any Ubuntu, you can have access to a normal file system. There you can directly see that what type of through terminal you can directly put ls command, and then you can see the list of all the possible commands in that particular current directory. Okay. So in that particular list command, if you type the a switch means list all, then it will show you all possible files with related. So here the attribute means what kind of restriction or what kind of access is defined in terms of attribute. So when we say attribute is going to define that whether you are able to read a particular file, you are going to have the right access to that particular file, or you can delete it or not. So obviously, if you are having the right access, then obviously you have many other things, including the definition of attribute. We will define this attribute definition only in majorly two categories. First is the write access and second is the read access. Because most of the time we are concerned with only these two types of accesses. So when we say that we have read access, then we can only have the content access. Now in that also, when you have the read access to that particular file, then again the file attributes come into picture with respect to locking. Because if that particular file is locked by a certain process and that is having read access to that particular file, then another file cannot have the read access. But there might be the case that when a particular file is open for all, and anybody who is willing to read the content of that particular file, you just come over there and have access. Okay, so in this fashion also you can have access, means there is no locking concept. So locking affects the simultaneous reading or writing to that particular file. But normally, in normal fashion, the write access is exclusive and your read access is shared. It means that if multiple people or multiple parties, multiple processes are reading a particular file in the same moment, then obviously there is no problem because they are not interrupting with the basic nature of the file. But if you are giving multiple write access to multiple processes at the same time, then multiple parties will try to negotiate with the content. And there they will do random modifications, and those random modifications may result in the form of some sort of errors. Means later on there might be some logical errors, there might be some organizational errors. So some of the processes, those are trying to have a particular kind of modification in that particular files. Many times those modification would not be part of that particular file, because one process did modification, then it left out, and then suddenly second process came down there and it did just the reverse of the first process. So in this way, many times the situation will be like this, that it will be a chaos. So just to avoid that chaos, just to stop this sort of functionality where no process is assured of the thing that what it wrote in that particular file is available or not after its right execution there. So to prevent these sorts of possibilities, what we do, that we have defined that write behavior, write operation is exclusive and read operation is shared. So in this way, locking and attributes, these two things are very much related. Similar fashion, operation that you are writing to a file, that attribute means it is defining the status of a particular file. So you can say that attributes are kind of flags, okay, where you will just simply show that it is the status of file. Okay, you have the write access, you have the read access, you have no access, or you have every access. Likewise, okay, but operation in actual, what you are doing with that particular file. Okay, so that is going to be the operation. So obviously you can create a file. You will, when you will create a file, you will give it a proper name. Now that naming nomenclature will depend on what kind of policies that particular file system is allowing. And definitely many times you have that 255 is the maximum limit that you can put in a file name. And similarly, there is a well-fixed extension to that particular file. So your user-defined name and that extension together define the name of the file. So in a creation operation, you will create a file, you will give a proper name to it, and then you will put a certain content inside that particular file for later use. Okay, once you have created, you will save it. Okay, so again, a second operation. Then, but normally when we define operations, then saving and all, these are not given some kind of separate operations, because those are very obvious. So creation, modification, and deletion, these are the very prominent operations. Okay. Additionally, when we say that we have created one file, then it is not the case that in a memory area it is going to be the single file. There are lots of files. So if there are lots of files, obviously those are going to have some sort of connection to each other, because from one file, for example, you stored some sort of logical program in one file. Okay, so if your another logical component that is going to be the part of the first component, then that is stored in a second file. So from file one, you are supposed to move on to second location that is stored, means that is defined with respect to second file. So like we have the subroutine concept, or we have the function concept in programming languages. So you will jump from one location to another. So in computer architecture, you guys must have studied that how you can jump from one location to another. Obviously, the interrupt concept, the first file location will get stopped and you will jump on to second location, complete the task, and again come back to the original location. Okay. So in this way, there is a dependencies of file to each other. First file is dependent on another, another is dependent on then another. And in this way, multiple files have a mesh kind of structure. Okay. In terms of dependencies. So if you draw a dependency graph, okay, then it is going to be very cumbersome many times, because there are lots of files and there might be lots of dependencies. Because if a single file is going to have at least 2 or 3 dependencies, okay, in terms of data need or some processing need or something like that, then if there are thousands of files, then you can imagine the structure. Okay, so in this way, we are not going to delve into depth in this particular direction, because that is out of the scope of this particular subject. And when we say file, then from operating system point of view, you are just concerned with its structure. What is its type? How are its attributes are defined to be? Then what are the different possible operations? What are the different locks that you can put onto a particular file, and what is the interconnection to each other file? Okay. Then we are going to have some sequential and direct access. As we just discussed, that there are multiple files and there are multiple dependencies. So obviously, when you want to jump to a second location, okay, then again jumping onto second location, then you need to execute that particular program. So again, you need to start from scratch, means not from scratch, means from the starting location, or you need to jump directly to the actual location where you want to be. So if you have only sequential access, means your memory is allowing sequential access only, then you have to start from the start location. Then you will move to the base location. Then from base location, you will read byte by byte or from block to block. Okay. And then you move to the intended location and you'll start execution. Okay. So similar way, how you will means how processor will get to know that now it is the location and I need to start execution. So you will send an interrupt to processor. So then the concept of interrupts come into picture. Then the interrupt will go to processor. Processor will get to know that now it is the time to start action. Okay, so it will start to execute the content at that particular memory location. And by the end of that particular program, again a second interrupt will send to the processor that now please stop. Our task is over. Okay, so after doing all these things, processor will stop and will move to second task. And this file concept means once you have completed your task, you again jump back to the original location. Okay. So here the access method, the concept of access came into picture. If you had the direct access, then obviously the processing time means the response time of the processor would have been less. Okay. But if you have the sequential access, obviously the time is going to be bit more. So definitely we want always direct access, and this direct access can be implemented using two types of methods. Normally we call it direct and index method. So direct method means there is a dedicated separate file where the start location of each of the functional module is defined in a particular file. And there is a second method, that is your index method. Index method is a combination of sequential and direct. Means you will define multiple indexes in the file or in the memory chunk, you can say. Okay. And then starting of each of the chunk, sub chunk, you can say, because memory is the whole chunk. So start location of the each sub chunk is stored in that particular index. Like you have multiple chapters in your book, and if you want to read a particular chapter's content, then you directly see the contents table and you move on to direct a particular page. So that is the role of indexing. You reached at that particular location. But in actual, that chapter start page is not your intended location. Inside that chapter, you move on to the third or fourth page. So firstly, you landed onto the particular page, and inside that chapter, you don't know. For example, you don't have detailed contents. Okay. So you don't know exactly that where your actual concept is going to be in that chapter. So once you have landed onto the base chapter location, then page 60 onwards, then you have to search sequentially. Okay. So in this way, this type of memory access, this type of indexed memory access is a combination of sequential and direct. First, you have landed onto the base location directly, and then you started the search of that particular location that you want to execute sequential. Okay. Then we have the concept of file system organization. File system organization means that you have multiple files. But when you have multiple files and again you have multiple dependencies, okay, then it is very hectic to manage these sort of large memory system. So you have thousands of, or if now as we have seen that memory has become very cheap object. So in this way, people do have lots of memory in their system. So in this way, they want to store more and more content because ultimately any person wants to make the maximum use of its machine. So when we say that I have this terabyte of memory, I have this kind of large memory, then obviously I want to store almost all words of data in best possible way in my system. So then you store that data, but once you have stored all the possible data, then accessing that data has become a problem because you want to reduce your access time, because if access time is more, then again your performance will be slow. So that's why your memory management and as well as your file management becomes very important to minimize that particular response time, because many times we do think that response time is a feature of CPU, means it is a feature of processor, but it is not always the case, because if your processor needs a particular file and that is gonna be part of that particular current program's execution, okay, then firstly you have to find that file. So inside memory, what is the access type? Then where that particular file is stored. If you have not managed any directory system inside your system, then obviously your memories are supposed to be distributed randomly all over the memory area. And on top of it, to worse off this situation, if you have sequential memory access, then you are doomed. Means you have to start from the start of memory, and then you are supposed to search byte by byte. So in this way, you are gonna means this large memory, what you were supposed to proud of 2 seconds before, you will regret on this particular situation that why did I store so many files and why do I have this large storage? Because if there is some real time program that you need execution of, and you need a particular file that you don't have access to, and you are searching in a random space, okay, so that real time program obviously is not going to finish before it's a deadline. So in this way, your access method as well as your file system organization are complementary to each other, and these become very much important. These concepts become highly importance in case of real time operating system, because there you need a particular kind of execution, so that you don't miss it, or I should not use the term don't, you should never miss your deadline. Because if it's a hard real-time operating system and a hard real-time process you are running inside your system, then obviously it's a consequence. The worst consequences are going to be really disastrous. So in this way, we should say that file system organization is a concept that looks simple but is of vital importance. Okay. So firstly, what is your disk and what is its a type? So what is your disk type? For example, nowadays people do ask for SSD. So why do they ask? Because obviously they know that we need fast access. So if you have SSD inside your system, then if you have one option that your total memory is SSD only, okay. But you, if it's costly for you, then obviously you are going to go with the second-hand solution. Means either you ask for a second-hand solution, but that as we know that memory performance deteriorates over the period of time. So we don't prefer second-hand systems. But again, the economical constraints. So go with the midway. Means you buy a new system, but ask for a less amount of SSD. So then you have, for example, in my system, if I have 1 TB storage and I have 256, okay, the 256 is SSD inside it. So then obviously that 256 is going to give the best performance in comparison to the rest of the memory part. So I am supposed to dedicate that particular storage part only to that kind of programs. So those are supposed to access memory very frequently. And obviously those are system programs, because the system programs are dedicatedly continuously in connection with the system hardware components. So they need the fastest type of memory access. So in this way, when you have a very limited memory access, and that too in type of you have SSD access, then define your C drive on the top of this SSD memory. Okay, so C drive is going to store your all system programs, and when you try to run all those, then obviously C drive is going to get functional. So then operating system and all the system programs and utilities and all kind of drivers and all, those are supposed to get executed and stored. Means they are gonna to store on SSD and supposed to be give the less response time. So in this way, firstly your disk structure, its characteristics, then on top of it, what is the directory structure? Then directory structure means how many levels you have defined in directories. Okay, so if you have defined multiple levels, then again you have to go into the depth of that particular structure, and then again you need to fetch out. So that is gonna to take more time, because more depth means more access operations. So read operation is gonna to take kind of less time in comparison to write operation. So if the situation is worse, means you are in a such type of situation that you need multiple and very frequent write access, then obviously it is going to again gonna to take more time in comparison to read operation. So in that particular kind of scenario, you are supposed to dedicatedly have the SSD access, and that also some means not only hard disk, means those programs should be dedicatedly in them, and if possible, then assign those tasks into cache memory. Okay, because obviously your registers are not gonna to handle big programs, so you cannot store kind of information there that is large in space complexity, because you are supposed to have only counters or the kind of variables or very small size data elements. Those are supposed to get changed very frequently. Those are supposed to get stored inside registers. Then you can have a part or the portion or the subroutine function kind of thing that is small in size into cache, and then it is supposed to be taken by the processor very frequently to have access to that particular memory area for the ultimate execution of your program. But don't worry all these things, because all these things whatever we are talking about here, these are subject to just a theoretical use. To a general user means, as we are studying it, we are just having a theoretical knowledge of all these things, because all these things are already programmed inside your processor and inside your operating system and its behavior, because processor is supposed to give your execution facility. But how exactly which particular disk part is going to be used and how frequently it is going to be used, which part is going to get stored where, all these things are supposed to be managed by operating system and its underlying policies. Okay. Obviously, if you are an administrator and you have disk access, then obviously then you can decide that what sort of things you can store at what type of memory part. Then moving forward, if you are having more number of accesses, more number of directory levels, then it is going to add your time complexity, because it is going to increase your access time. Then finally, file structure means it's a different concept that we have already discussed. So your directory structure might be in the form of tree also. Okay, so trees are nonlinear data structure, and it expands in a nonlinear fashion, and always you need to start from the root level. So as we know that tree is gonna to have a particular kind of particular number of children at a particular moment of time, depending on its a type, means what type of tree do you have. So if you want to have a basic understanding, can anyone of you tell me the basic definition of tree and why do we need it? I hope that all of you must have read operating system, sorry, data structure. So if you have gone through data structure, then you are supposed to be familiar with the tree and its basic importance. Anyone of you?
Is it when we want some sort of hierarchy?
Yeah. And and anything else in addition to hierarchy? Because I think there are some other options also available to maintain hierarchy. But what is specifically tree offers? Okay, let me reduce the complexity of this question to this point, that what is the basic difference between a graph and a tree?
Professor, could it be the fact that in tree all the nodes are linked together?
All the nodes are linked together.
Yeah.
I think the immediate successor and the predecessor, those are connected to each other only.
Yeah. Yeah. So to one node, it's the one pointing to that node, and the node it is pointing to. It'll be connected to only those two. But,
yeah, but
they're linked up to a certain extent.
Okay, but if the connectivity is the means matter of importance, then why don't we have graph? Because in graph we have multiple connection, many more connections than tree.
A graph is not necessarily directed.
Obviously, then we can create directed acyclic graphs. Means there will be no cycle, no possibility of roaming for means infinite time, and we do have directed directions also. Then okay, one point, can we have, is it necessary that in graphs we have only single start point? Anyone? Okay, no issue. So when we talk about a tree structure, okay, first thing that normally we have binary tree structure. Okay, when we say binary tree structure, then it gives us the facility that on the left hand side we are supposed to have the items those are having the less numerical value in comparison to its root node, and then on the right side we are going to we are going to store the higher values. And in this way it makes our search operation means that is possible with the help of a traversal. Then obviously it becomes very easy because you can apply binary search and like that. Okay, in addition to this, there are other types of trees also where you can define the behavior or the number of branches according to your suitability. So in tree, first thing that this multi-level structure can be easily implemented with a tree. And when we talk about memory, when we talk about the memory management and file management, then the root location is very important. The next concept that is of mounting, that points to that concept only. Okay, so mounting is very much important because you need to know that where is the start, what is the starting point. So in Windows, it is not clear because many times users don't have any sort of idea that what is our mounting point. Means we usually talk about C drive, D drive, E drive. But again, what is the central point where you have access to all these locations? That central point is missing. Means you don't have a concrete idea. Means you never realize, you never work on that particular file location. That is known to be a mounting location. So that mounting location is supposed to be presented to users in Linux system in a very clear way. Means when you will work on any Linux system or when you work on normally on Ubuntu system, so then there you see a slash sign. Okay, so whenever you just type cd space slash, so you will directly jump onto the mounting location. So that mount location, that is your start point of memory location. Okay, so in tree structure, we always have a fixed start point, that is root. You cannot jump onto the random in between location and then you can start forward. Okay, it is not gonna be case because in graph there might be some multiple random starting points. Okay, but in case of tree, only one starting point is available there, and from that particular location then you can have access to other memory locations in forward way, or you can say you can go down into depth, or you can have the breadth first search like the BFS. So in this way, what type of searching algorithm you are applying, that is your choice. Means according to application, according to your suitability, you want to employ a particular kind of algorithm. But your data structure choice is also very important, because on every data structure you cannot perform every, means you can perform every type of operation, but what kind of time complexity you will incur, that will depend on the choice of data structure also. Okay, so your operation as well as your data structure choice, both things are very important, and both things are related to your file system, because in file system you need to first store program, then you need to access those programs. Means your storage means the structure, and then your access to those files means operations. Both things are part of file management, and file management is part of memory management, because ultimately you need to access all those things. Okay, so in this way all these concepts are related to each other, even not only of operating system. If you talk about all other subjects also, every subject is related to every other subject in some direct or indirect fashion. Okay, you just need to maintain the proper links, and then you will understand this whole phenomenon. So moving forward, we will talk about now, we will talk about mounting. So mounting is that it's a kind of process where you define that it is our start of memory. Okay, so mounting is important because when you mount your memory with respect to a particular location, then that location onwards you define every data structure. So in Ubuntu, when we will have a case study discussion, then we will definitely gonna to see all these things, that what kind of attributes, how those are gonna get stored, and then what is the mount point, and where actually do you start storing all the files and data structure inside your memory area. So in Ubuntu, you will have a complete idea that my slash means slash is a kind of symbol only, obviously, because you cannot represent the numerical values in terms of memory addresses. in a computer system, because if you store every location or if you depict every memory location with respect to its reference address, then obviously it is going to be very tedious task, because first thing it's management, and second thing is its readability. Because as a naive user, if you are a very basic to operating system or computer science, then you are not going to have an idea that what does it mean that 0x is 0065. Okay, so 0x hexadecimal address, but what is this 0065? Then again, you are going to define 0x of 5609. Okay, so in this way, if you are supposed to remember a particular file, then you need to give a user-defined name to that particular file. But now I say that no, my memory scheme is like that you cannot give characters. Okay, you are supposed to give only hexadecimal numbers. Now you are bounded in the means you are bounded from 0 to F location only. Okay, so from 0 to F, you need to give names to all the files. Now you are supposed to give names like that only. So when though you are totally familiar with computer science, okay, you are familiar with computer architecture, memory address, locations, and all these things, but still you will face difficulty after 10 files, 20 files, 30 files, 50 files, 100 files. So after 100 files, it will be really tedious task for you to even search a file location, because again you need to type the whole address of that particular memory location, and then again you need to address that particular file with its memory location address only. Okay, so again it comes to the means this whole discussion again goes into a discussion of readability and its actual implementation level discussion. Means because many times people discuss that what level of readability is affordable. Okay, so when we say that affordable, then it becomes again a very subjective issue of discussion, because affordability means it is different to every other person. So if you are a computer scientist, then readability is not a very much important thing for you. Okay, some sort of a random pseudocode will work for you. You will understand the phenomena of the program, and then you will understand that what a particular program is going to convey a particular message. But if you are a very naive user, okay, then for a layman's perspective, if you see, then all the scenario is just opposite. Because if you don't give him the detailed code, and that also with the proper kind of captions and all the references, and you need to maintain the documentation also inside the code. So that's why many times you will see that, for example, when you teach a first programming class, many of you might have done that also. So when you teach any layman person, means a very basic coding class, then you define everything, you comment out everything, that this is the initialization of variables, this is the declaration of variables, this is the computation, this is the printing of final result, this is the closing of main function, and now it is the output. So everything you need to comment out, because the person you are talking about, okay, what is your intended audience, that is important. Because ultimately communication, again, if your communication is not proper, and communication depends on both parties, okay, it is not that you have some sort of knowledge and the other party is not going to catch up, then it is of no use. So again, you need to maintain the medium, and again you need to maintain the synchronization, then you need to maintain the language also, and all these things you need to maintain, whatever is the component of communication. So here in mounting, first we need to, when we say that we are going to teach people operating system, we are going to teach people memory organization, we are going to teach people the file system storage and its management, then we need to discuss about mounting point. And okay, so because first thing comes into mind that what is the starting point, means where we are starting. So we are starting from mounting point, then downwards we are defining different memory locations, those are the base addresses, and then inside those base addresses again you are defining sub base addresses, and likewise you are moving downwards, means you say downwards or onwards or whatever, because location direction depends on the kind of organization that you have planned inside your memory. Okay, but usually we visualize the memory structure in a tree form. And why do we visualize in tree form? There is just one reason, because we have a single mounting point. Okay, in tree structure also we have normally a single root node, so that's why we normally compare it with a tree structure. Now we understood that what is the mounting and what is the mount point. So we are going to move further, that is file share. So as we do know that in the earlier lectures also we discussed the concept of sharing. So when multiple processes share their spaces, so in that fashion, one process can intrude into the space of another. But that space in which they are intruding in the presence of another processes also, that space is shareable. So that's why there is no problem. But if you want to intrude into some processes personal space, that is not possible because exclusive locks are available there. We discussed the concept of locking. Exclusive lock means only the process having the access to that particular location can put exclusive lock. And then once the lock is put and that is exclusive in nature, then you cannot have access to that particular location. Okay, so sharing is the file sharing can be either manual or automatic. When you say manual, then in that fashion you have to particularly assign the access, kind of access, whether it is read access or write access. That access you need to assign to a particular process. That okay, you want to access this particular location. Let me please wait. Let me assign you a particular role. Then you will assign the administrator role to that particular process, and then it will access. Just to have a real world example, you many times might have observed that if you want to perform some kind of security operation, okay, with respect to a particular process, or you want to do some kind of operation that is not supposed to be part of a guest process, okay, then you need administrative authority. So that administrative access you gain normally by right clicking on that particular program, and you simply click run in administrator mode. Okay, so or run as administrator. So normally when you run as administrator option you chooses, and then when you choose this particular option, then that particular program runs in its full-fledged access mode. Then you can perform all kind of possible operations. Those are associated with that particular kind of process, and with respect to all the memory locations, those are subjected to be in touch of that particular process. Okay, so administrator is a kind of role only. Obviously, you know, okay, it's a kind of power that you are assigning to a particular process, that now you are the boss. Okay, so boss, whatever you want to perform, you just simply perform, and when your task is done, just let me inform. Okay, so process will give an interrupt signal to CPU once it will finish its work, and then CPU will assign the administrative privileges to some other process who is willing to access that particular kind of memory location. Okay, so in this way, manual file sharing is going to take place. Second is automatic. Automatic is a kind of that many processes are there in the queue. Okay, there is a queue, there is a data structure, and many processes are waiting in the queue. And there is a particular location that is subject to access to all the processes, but one process at a time. That is the sharing policy. So if that is exclusive access, but that is not exclusive access with respect to some lock or something like that. Okay, it is just that one process in a time. So there is a single entry point with respect to that particular location where you can access. And once a particular process is accessing that particular memory, then no other process can enter into. Okay, then semi-automatic might be there. That is a combination of manual and automatic. Means some of the accesses, some of the memory parts are manual, and some of the memory accesses are automatic. Then there is a concept of failure. When we say failure, then many times you are trying to access a particular location, but that particular location you are not able to access. Why? Because there is a failure. Now, what is the meaning of failure? Means you started a particular operation, okay, but that operation couldn't get completed due to any reason. Means the reason might be multiple reasons, because the operating system or the system is a kind of huge virtual space. Means a huge, I'm saying, because normally we see a computer system as a just a simple, you can say 8 to 10 inches or 14 to 15 inch long system. But that 14 to 15 inch long system is not just a simple hardware. Inside it, there is a huge virtual space. Huge virtual space means it's a kind of your mind. It means your mind size is what? It is just like of normally if we weighted, then just a very few grams of weight is there. Okay, but there is a infinite imagination is stored inside your mind. Okay, in the similar fashion, when we say then 14 to 15 inch screen is that 14 to 15 inch hardware is not just your computer. Okay, inside it there are immense possibilities with so many virtual possibilities in terms of access, in terms of authorization, in terms of memory implementation, in terms of file management, in terms of hardware policies, in terms of software policies, in terms of user management, in terms of so many other security policies those you want to implement on that particular hardware. So in this way, all these things that we talk about, whether it is supposed to be the programming, supposed to be the architecture, supposed to be the processor, memory, and all these things are what? These are the conceptual things with related to this particular machine, and all these things together are going to define the behavior of this particular machine. So when we say there are endless possibilities in virtual space, means the virtual space of the computer is very large, means there are so many virtual entities, and if there are so many virtual entities, means so many possibilities are there. So like in real life, we do have normal failures. In the similar fashion, there might be multiple failures, and the reason might be very different. Means many times you are working in a AC environment, okay, and there is no issue of heat, okay, but you are very much casual in this aspect that no, my system is never gonna to have the heating issues and something like that, because I'm in an AC environment, the outside temperature is very good and like that, okay. But some sort of program that is supposed to create a kind of replica of its own kind, and all the replicas are supposed to behave, means those are supposed to get activated at the same time, means some sort of Trojan horse or some sort of backdoor or virus got presence inside your system, and it started to create its replicas. All the replicas is creating more replicas, kind of warm, and then those are supposed to get functional at the same time. Then again, those are supposed to have memory access, processor access, and supposed to exhaust your total resources. Then your system might have hitting issues in that particular kind, because your processor is running off so much high speed, because there are so many processes, it need to fluctuate onto each of the process with so much faster speed. So in this way, it is supposed to work at its maximum clock cycle. Okay, when it is work on its maximum clock cycle, it is supposed to generate more heat, and that heat, if it is not your heat sink is not working in a proper way, though you are in a means cooling environment, but still there are chances of heating interrupts, means particular kind of memory that is supposed to get accessed very frequently, that will generate a heating interrupt to the processor. That dear processor, please take consideration of this aspect, that this temperature is going beyond the threshold. Okay, so you take care, or it will else I'll burn down. So in this fashion, when the heat will go beyond the threshold level, then processor will recognize this issue and will immediately turn off your PC. Okay, then you will not get aware of this phenomenon, that what happened actually. Suddenly your processor got shut down automatically. So many times it is a normal scenario, but when we don't have a kind of cooling environment, we do have very heating temperature outside also, and processor is also working at high speed. Then in that case, many times your system explodes. Means nowadays system don't explode, even your phones, normal cell phones, those don't explode. What is the reason? Because more advanced algorithms, more mature interrupts have been developed with respect to operating system to just detect your heating presence inside your system, and to work in advance before the actual hardware defect takes place. Okay, so before the actual hardware disaster, your software takes care of all the things and just shut down our system. Okay, so in this fashion, many things do happen in the virtual space. What I'm trying to say, that failure is a very subjective entity. There are so many things, you can never imagine that what is the actual reason of a particular failure. Okay, yes, like you have a troubleshooter. Okay, inside your system, you have a system troubleshooter. So whenever there is a problem, there is a option, means run troubleshooter. So what troubleshooter does, it's a simple piece of program. So it looks for all the possible listed possibilities. Those are present inside your system memory. Means there is a catalog, and your troubleshooter takes care of all the possibilities. Means whether it is the issue, no. Whether it is the issue, no. Whether it is the issue, no. And it keeps on checking all the possibilities. At the end of time, many times a troubleshooter runs completely and it says there is no issue with your system. Okay, so many times you might have encountered this thing, that your troubleshooter is saying there is no issue, but your system is having issues. You are experiencing that it is delaying, it is not working properly. Many times the system gets stuck automatically, it gets a freeze down. So in this fashion, your system is saying different. but you are experiencing something different. So point is that there is no proper coordination between the actual state of hardware and your troubleshooter. Means either your troubleshooter is outdated or your system has developed some new kind of diseases, means malfunctions. Those are not in the recognition of your troubleshooter. Okay, so in this way, a failure might be there in any system, and with respect to a failure, there might be the chances of a particular memory hijacking, means one process may take over another process just because of your system is not properly configured. And in this fashion, again, you need to define the behavior. Means how your system is going to react in a particular kind of failure situation. So then again, you need to write a particular piece of program that if this kind of failure occurs, then you need to take this kind of step and like that. Okay. So many times what we generally see is that a particular failure occurs, then there is an activity of rollout. Okay. Then rollout again throws you at the same state where you actually started the operation. Okay. And it is very important. It is a concept of normally, if I remember correctly, it is a concept of databases. Okay, so in database management systems, we normally have this particular concept of rolling back. So we roll back to the actual state of the system where we actually started this operation, which caused to this particular kind of failure. Okay. Then second concept is consistency. Now, as I just discussed the concept of this rolling back thing, then consistency is the main reason of doing this, because if some program initiated but didn't get complete, okay, then we have to roll back because we need to maintain consistency. And consistency is also the concept that is related between multiple instances of memory. For example, there is a distributed operating system, okay, and there are multiple physical locations, then only you need distributed operating system, okay. So at one memory location, you are going to have one replica of memory. At the second location, you are going to maintain the second. Then if you are making a change in the first memory, means the first replica, then obviously you need to replicate all those changes periodically, because consistently at the same time, it is not possible or very costly to maintain all the changes in all the possible replicas. So you periodically do all these things. Okay, so periodically you are trying to manage all the things, whatever you have done in the first replica, and you are maintaining in the second replica. But if you are not able to do so, means some sort of failure came into the picture at the first memory replica, then obviously that failure froze your total memory. Okay, then once you gain control or you gain access, or your memory got hijacked in some fashion, somebody took over control, like you must have heard of ransomware. Okay, people take control of your resources and they do ask for money to gain, means to give you back the control. So in that fashion, once you gain the control either by any sort of mean, okay, you got the control back, then you need to roll back. You roll back to the actual previous state that was supposed to be consistent and that was supposed to be safe. So consistency means you are supposed to maintain the same system state across the all distributed locations of your system. Okay, that is the concept of consistency. Whatever is required to do so, that you have to do. Otherwise, there will be a chaos, because multiple parties working at multiple physical locations, they will show multiple pieces of code or multiple state of systems at their side. One person will claim that it is the current system state. Another person will claim that no, your state is not the right one. My state is this. It is the right one. So in this way, multiple after some failure possibilities, there might be the scenarios like this. Multiple possibilities are like this. Then to maintain consistency, you need to maintain some sort of protection mechanisms also. Okay, so many times, as I discussed it, that there is a locking mechanism. Okay, so what is it? It is a kind of protection mechanism. Means that you need to first lock a particular memory location, then only you need to give access to a particular process to that particular memory location. Then we have the access list concept. Access list concept means there is a well-defined, it is not always the case that one process is going to have the access to that location, not another. So if there is a group, okay, that means group and access list, these two things are kind of interrelated. If you have defined the group of processes, that all the processes means all the requests are coming. For example, you take the concept of like in Kriya. when I experienced means here on to have internet access, we don't need any proxy. Means the proxy is a kind of intermediate service that creates a kind of a firewall, software firewall, you can say. Okay, so that firewall just keeps on going all the activities those are coming from the authentic resources and blocks all the non-authentic activities. So in here means in Kriya we don't need any proxy. So there is a no separate software kind of firewall that blocks you. You just simply log into means you get the access to the network, means either it is the Ethernet or Wi-Fi network, and you just simply access the internet. But if you want to create a software kind of firewall in terms of proxy layer, then you need to again maintain a authentication wall. So that authentication wall will be a kind of software wall. So there you need to put your proxy username and proxy password, and then you need to get access to actual connectivity. Means you are supposed to get connected to the Kriya server or your whatever Kriya network you will define like that. Okay. So in this fashion, many times you need to define the groups because it is hectic to define the production mechanism or the access mechanism with respect to each individual process. So many students are studying in Kriya. So many, even Kriya is a very small university. If you study kind of SRM university, okay, so kind of 40,000 students are going to take admission every year. So if this big university is functioning over somewhere and then you don't have proper grouping or access mechanism, then you can you can imagine the scenario of memory access. Means so many thousands of accesses requests are coming daily or even every minute. Okay, and that you need to manage in a very seamless manner so that none of the request gets dropped down, gets down. Okay, so in this way, if you are unable to manage all the requests, then your user experience is going to get impacted, and ultimately you means like you imagine as in this particular pandemic era, we are going to have the exams online. So if there is an exam going on and if you don't have the proper access to your network, means the intended network, then in that way that particular situation is going to be really problematic for a particular student or a particular faculty or particular management. So in this way we need to define groups. Why? Because it's a simple concept that you have thrown everything into a single room and then you are trying to manage things in real time. Then it is going to be really problematic. So why not to define all the things in a group fashion? Okay, you make sections in room and then you put one type of thing in one room, one section, another type of thing in another section, another type of thing, then so on, all the subsections. Okay, so in this fashion, you just group all your users. Then you provide access, respective access to those group of users. It means it is all the students' email IDs. These all are faculty email IDs. These all are the respective staff email IDs. And then you give the permission to all the set of those email IDs. Means that these email IDs can have access to these memory locations. These email IDs can have, or you can do this grouping based on the IP addresses also. Okay, if you have dedicated your system. But nowadays we have multiple systems, so obviously keeping track of IP, that is also a hectic process. So we are not moving on to that detail. We will discuss all these things in detail in coming lectures. So the fourth concept, that is device management. Okay, so finally what we discussed till now, we discussed the process management. Why process management is very much important. What is the role of memory management? Then we discussed the role of file management. Means the software entity, process, and the memory. And the memory and process means file, because its access will be done by process and memory is going to store the file. Okay, all these three components are supposed to be covered till now. Now we are going to discuss about the device. Device is the real hardware entity that is actually going to perform some function, either to give input to the system or to take output from the system. Okay, and then it is going to convert that output into particular format. Like if you are having printer, then obviously it is going to print, and you are having plotter, then it is going to plot. So in this fashion, multiple devices are going to be part of this particular section, and all those devices are supposed to be managed in its optimal fashion, because the device management also impacts the performance of your system. Not it looks not of that much importance, but it is of very much importance because we know that many times we need manual intervention. Whenever we need manual intervention, means the user is supposed to give manual input to the program or supposed to take output manually. Okay, one by one. So in this way, whatever is the speed of your user as well as what is the speed of your device, that is very important. So best real life example is that your printer, suppose your printer is very slow, okay, and your processor is obviously very fast in comparison to any kind of printer, okay. So then your processor is supposed to give a activity of printing 1000 pages to a printer. Then printer is going to take at least 15 to 20 minutes to print 1000 pages if it is very fast, okay. And if it is a very normal kind of printer, then obviously it is going to take 1-2 hours. Then in this way, if the device speed is not compatible with your processor speed and you need input either from keyboard or mouse or some sort of other tablet or something, and you need to give output to some sort of slow peripheral device like a printer, plotter or something like that, then there is a huge gap in the processing speed. Then you need some sort of synchronization mechanism. Synchronization is important because if you don't maintain the synchronization, either your processor CPU cycles will get restricted or your device will unnecessarily cause wait for other devices, okay. So in this fashion, you need to maintain the state of your system. When we say that you need to maintain the state of your system, then it includes the device management also in this fashion, because device is ultimately the point where your output is gonna be, okay, and device is the starting point where your input is going to be inside your system. So in this fashion, we are going to discuss about some common definition, that is device driver, what is the concept of ports, what is buses, and then what is the need of synchronization, synchronous and asynchronous device types, direct sequential access device types, what is the concept of sharing and dedicated access, and then what is the concept of polling, very much important, okay. Then interrupts, we have already discussed what is the concept of DMA, that is direct memory access. Why do we need spooling and what is important is, then there are different disk scheduling techniques. What are all those techniques, okay. So we are going to cover all these things in short, because already most of these concepts we have already discussed, like interrupts, like synchronization, like sequential and direct access, like sharing, okay. So we are going to start with the basic definition of device management. In device, we normally have device drivers, okay. Many times we do need external device drivers. External device drivers means that those are not present on your hardware. Now means a simple example that many times you bring a device and you just simply plug in to your system. So your system directly automatically extracts the software that is attached to that particular kind of hardware, and then your system starts running that particular system software, means that is the device driver. Now that device driver is going to take care of all the functions those are related to that particular device, okay. So that device driver, when it is available on that particular hardware only, means you bought a new some sort of new functional device from market. For example, a very simple example of pen drive, okay. You took a pen drive from market, you just simply plug into system for the very first time, and your system doesn't have any sort of device driver. Then many times your device automatically gets recognized by the operating system. How it is possible? Because your USB driver is available, might be available inside your that particular what I was talking about, USB. Okay, so that USB device might be having your software code of that particular device driver also. In this way, as soon as you just plug in, the operating system starts to recognize, and at the bottom right corner of your system, many times you see that small pop-ups do come out, and they say that recognizing device, maintaining connection, establishing connection, or something like that. Whenever you connect a very new device, okay, it is because of that the system software is always available in the firm area, the firmware. Many times, if there is a hardware and there is a software, both are present onto a single device, that device is called firmware. Okay, so that firmware is supposed to supply that software component that is required for its intended functioning to the operating system. That's why operating system is processing all the required details in the background, and it is informing to the user by popping out all the respective details that whatever it is doing, it is configuring the software, it is doing all this and all. Okay. Then we have the concept of ports. Obviously, you must have must be familiar with the concept of ports. That is very much important from operating system as well as very much important from microcontroller point of view. Okay, when I say microcontroller, you understand it microprocessor. Okay, and if you understand the computer architecture also, then you also be having a very good knowledge of ports. So port, if you have heard of computer network, then in computer networks there is a transport layer of communication. Okay, there is a two-layered structure that I have already talked about in my first lecture. There is a one OSI layer structure of communication, and there is a second TCP/IP communication structure. TCP/IP is the actual de facto standard, and that is used everywhere. So inside that there is a transport layer. So inside the transport layer, we define the concept of socket. Okay, so that socket is the combination of IP address and port number. So when we say that there is a port-to-port communication, it means what? Port means a particular process is running on that particular port. Your system might be having many ports, and it might be in the range of thousands. Okay, and ports might be of two types. It is not always that whatever we see in the hardware on the backside of the system or on the side of the system, those are the ports only. No, those are hardware ports. Okay, you might be having thousands of software ports. So those software ports are going to take care of a specific process functionality. A particular process might be running on a particular port, and it is supposed to get some sort of information from the another device. So that particular another device is supposed to release some sort of information on the respective counterpart of that particular port from its side, and the receiver is going to receive that information on a particular port, the intended port address. Okay, so for example, my IP address is 192.178.162.16, and my port number is 8080. Okay, and it's a well-known port address. So from this, I'm going to make a communication. Okay, sort of web communication. So then the another device that is also supposed to get access to 8080 port number in connection to this particular port, and then it is that particular IP address, whatever it. Let's assume 192.116.7.8. Okay, so that is going to receive that particular port information. So port-to-port communication means end-to-end communication. So in this fashion, there might be thousands of logical ports and obviously limited hardware ports, because you cannot have unlimited hardware ports, because it is going to be unrealistic scenario. You cannot have unlimited things in physical world, and obviously it is going to cost you. So you are supposed to have 4 or 5 USB ports, 4 or 5 other kind of HDMI and other ports. Okay, so in this fashion, there are limited hardware ports, but there are very high number of logical ports. That is the concept of ports, and those are very much important to take input and give output. Okay, then there is a concept of bus. So there are serial bus, parallel buses. So serial buses give input byte by byte, means either in byte by byte fashion or in block by block fashion. So there are serial buses, means serially you will input and take output from the system using these buses, and there are parallel buses. Parallel buses obviously increase your productivity and reduces your response time. Okay, then we are going to talk about the device types. So device types, we talked the concept of synchronization, why it is important, and how do we achieve it. With the help of queue or with the help of buffers, we achieve synchronization, and it is important because there is a time difference, means there is a processing time difference between two devices. For example, your processing device, your CPU is very fast, and your printer or your input output devices are supposed to be very slow in functioning. Obviously, because that is an electronic device, these are mechanical devices. So electronic and mechanical devices functioning and their response time, obviously those are far different. Okay, so if you are supposed to maintain, you are supposed to make the best use of your devices, best use of your hardware, then you are supposed to maintain some sort of synchronization mechanism so that your processor gives some sort of input to output device, and then it goes on to another process to give its functioning to other processes. Okay, so processor time doesn't get wasted; it keeps on shifting on to other processes and keeps on working. Okay, and whenever there is an interrupt comes from the input output devices that now our work is over, please take care of our work also. So processor will return to that particular work, will do that particular job, and again moves on to the next job. So in this fashion, synchronization is the key to success in terms of process management as well as in terms of input-output device management. Okay, Asynchronous communication is a kind of thing where there is no synchronization mechanism, means there are independent devices. Those are not linked to each other with any sort of synchronization mechanism. But obviously, those are supposed to communicate to each other. Otherwise, what is the importance of having all these things together? Okay, so you need to again having the concept of kind of polling or interrupts. Polling means you are checking something. Okay, like in elections, we do have polling. Okay, so in elections, we need to take the input of people. Okay, for example, in India, the largest democracy here, we are supposed to be the elections. The polling is supposed to be a really hectic task. Okay, so there we are supposed to again maintain some sort of mechanism so that within the intended deadline, we are supposed to complete all the things. So in this fashion, some sort of mechanism, external or internal mechanism, we need to develop. Similar way, when we need to make communication between the process.
Professor, can you hear us? Professor, you are on mute.
Okay, now you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I forgot to plug my power cable, so it got shut down. Okay, so we were discussing what was the last concept. It is supposed to be 5 minutes. Okay, so let me complete quickly. It is going to be the last concept. Okay, so here we are supposed to talk about polling. Okay, so in polling, we are going to have the opinion of others. Okay, like in normal elections we do have, but in computer organization or in operating system, we take the input status into consideration of other devices. So normally devices do poll to processor whether processor is available or not, to take concern of our status. Okay, or to take concern of our whatever functionality they want to put onto processor. Okay, and similar way the vice versa. So you can poll anything just to have a check of its status. So in this way, it is the polling. Now polling can be of multiple types. It might be continuous polling. Continuous polling means you are consistently trying to check the status of some device. That is continuous polling. But if there is a time period driven or some specific time driven polling, then it is supposed to be lighter on processor and memory, because it is not going to put extra consideration for that particular device, and that's why it is going to reduce the burden of processor. Okay, then we will discuss in detail in coming lectures on polling. Then interrupts you are familiar with. Whenever there is some sort of interruption, means some device wants to interrupt the processor, then it will send a particular kind of signal. Those are dedicated predefined signals inside OS. So it will send a signal to operating system, and once the operating system will receive that particular signal, it will get to know that that particular device wants my attention. So I need to go and have a look at that what is the status and what sort of problem is out there. So these are the interrupts. So whenever there is an interrupt, the processor need to stop its functioning. It need to do a context switch, like we discussed in terms of processor. Okay, it need to stop its current program and need to move on to the second program, perform the interrupt out there, and then need to resume the activity on the first process. Okay, then there is a concept of direct memory access. Direct memory access means that you are given the flexibility to have a direct memory access. Means normally, what is the concept? Means what is the functional behavior that an input-output device who wants to perform a memory access, and it wants to perform very frequent memory access for a very long time. Okay, so every time it wants to have a memory access, it need to inform to processor. So processor will give the permission to that particular device to have input-output, means operating system. When I say operating system, means it is the controlling part, and processor is the dumb part, because processor cannot do anything by itself. Always operating system need to guide all these hardware things. Okay, so operating system will guide processor, give the processor to that particular, assign processor to that particular input-output device, that okay, with the help of processor you may access this particular kind of memory location and you want to perform whatever operation you want to perform. Okay, so every time you need to take permission from operating system. So it keeps on changing, means it keeps on exchange of interrupts. Every time input-output device will interrupt to processor with the help of operating system, and then will take the permission of operating system, and then will access that particular memory location. And when it completes the execution of that particular location, again it will inform to operating system that our work is done. Now please take control back. Okay, so in this fashion, if you want to have consistent memory location access, and for very long time you need such particular kind of access, then why not to have a dedicated access? Okay, it's like that a person wants to have multiple times access to a single room. So then we say, okay, guy, you take access of this particular key, do whatever you want to do, okay, for the whole day, and by the end of the day, just return back the key to me. Okay, so in this fashion, there is a concept of direct memory access. When a device wants to have a dedicated memory operation for a very long time, okay, then processor gives the control to input-output devices with the help of a second piece of software. I should not say, or should say, yes, it's a second piece of software that is known as Direct Memory Access Controller, DMAC. Okay, so with the help of DMAC, the devices get direct control of memory, and they want to do whatever they want to do, and then they can continue. Okay, so in this fashion, direct memory access helps the fast memory operations for very long memory operations. Then there is a concept of spooling. Spooling means that is a kind of similar concept to buffering. Okay, in buffering, that is a kind of non-intelligent storage of everything. Means whatever is coming onto that is getting stored into buffer. Okay, but in spooling, there is a kind of intelligent structure that takes care of what kind of behavior one process is trying to do with respect to another behavior, another process. Okay. So, for example, processor gave a command of printing some 100 pages to printer. Then there is a dedicated buffer, and that buffer is going to be governed by the spooling process. So spooling will take care that there is a 100-piece printing status of one job, that is one process. And there is another process who is trying to print 2 pages. So then that process is supposed to take into consideration as job 2 from process 2 of 2 printing pages. Okay, and then at spooling level, it is gonna to make a differentiate between the priorities. So based on priorities also it can function. So kind of you can say that spooling is just an arrangement where you can store multiple activities at the buffer level of your device, whatever the output device you want to have out. So normally when we will discuss in detail concept, then by figures and all, you will have a clear cut idea what I'm talking about. Okay. So obviously when I'm saying that you are gonna to give output to output devices, then the whatever is the data rate of the devices, that is gonna to make the difference in the functionality of spooling. And obviously buffer size. So memory area and as well as the data rate, that is going to define the behavior as well as the performance of spooling. Then disk scheduling. Disk scheduling means like we have the processes, multiple processes, and how those are supposed to assign to processor so that the processor could perform the functioning of all these processes in the best possible way. We do have process scheduling. So in that we do round robin, means every process is supposed to get its time, okay, fixed time, or we are supposed to give priority scheduling. On priority also only processes will get execution, or shortest seek time first, like we have SSTF here in disk schedule, that you can have there also. Whatever is the burst time, there is a concept of burst time, means what is the lifetime of execution. So similar to process scheduling, we have the concept of disk scheduling, means there are multiple input output read or write requested with respect to particular disk. Okay, so one process want to make a read request, one process want to make a write request. So read write, so many read write requests are there, and the processor is supposed to perform all these activities. So there needs a scheduling activity. So scheduling need to be done in such a way that all these requests are supposed to fulfill and supposed to be fulfilled in the best possible way. So first is the first come first serve, means whatever request came first for read or write, processor is supposed to jump onto that location, do that activity and done. But suppose it's a directory structure. First location 0, last location 2000. Okay. So from 0 to 2000, you consider like a single tape. Okay. Like we do have tape memory. No? So it is easy to remember, means the functioning of the scheduling. Or there are different types of storage, in cylinders, in tracks. We do have the magnetic tapes in floppy disk and CD drives, but that is supposed to be cumbersome. So imagine like a tape. Okay. So here, that is the start location, that is the last location. Now, first request came onto the second location, so processor jump onto second location. Then second request came onto 99th location, processor jump onto 99th location. Third request came onto 2000 location, need to jump onto third. Means very long jumps in it need to make. But when it is the shortest seek time first, then there are multiple requests 2, 5, 7, 9, 2000. Then 2000 came the very first time, and processor head is currently at 0 location. So processor is not supposed to jump onto 2000 location. It is supposed to give priority to 2, 3, and 5th location read or write request, because those are nearer to its base location. Okay. So here it is the shortest seek time first. Seek means to find out something, to look for something. Okay. So here it is trying to look for the active read or write request that is supposed to get function, that is supposed to get executed by processor. So it is supposed to seek its all possible requests in the way of moving to the downside, means towards the end of the tape. Okay. Third is the scan, means it needs to scan the whole tape from left to right. In this way, means if left is the start, right is the end, then left to right. For me, it is left to right. For you, it is left to right, right to left. Okay. Then it is circular scan, C scan. Circular scan means once the processor reaches at the last of the tape, it again moves back to the start of the location. It doesn't come back. In scan, what it does, it moves towards the end. Then from end, it moves towards the start. In between, whatever request it encounters, it performs functioning out there. Okay. But in circular scans, by the end of tape, it directly jumps onto the base location of tape. Okay. Means in a circular fashion. Then in look, it doesn't scan the whole tape. It specifically jumps onto those locations which need specific functioning of processor. Okay. So it is look. Specifically, you need to look for those locations where the processor is required, means read or write requests are there, and it need to give function. It need to means offer its services. So in this fashion, look activity directly makes use of what kind of direct access of memory. because it is not supposed to have the sequential access. In case of scan, it is kind of sequential access. Means every location you are accessing and whatever in between wherever you encounter a read or write request, you are supposed to give function. Means you are supposed to operate your functionalities. But in loop, you are supposed to directly jump onto those locations where the read and write requests are there. Then there is a C loop. C loop, again, the concept of like C scan. You need to jump from the last location, not last tape location, onto the last read write request location. Again, you need to come onto the first location and then you need to start. Okay. So in this fashion, there is a very small difference in scan and loop. In scan, you go till the end of tape, and in loop, you just go at the end location, means end read or write location. You don't go unnecessarily towards the end of tape. So in this fashion, there are multiple disk scheduling algorithms, and accordingly, we will see some of the very basic numericals also, means how to calculate the seek time and all those things. Okay. So if you want to have any sort of question, you can ask. It's 6 o'clock. I took your 5 minutes extra. If you want to have any sort of question, please. Anyone? Am I audible?
Yes, Professor.
Okay. So I hope you don't have any question. So hope whatever I delivered reached to you and you had its comprehension. And I thought obviously you are exhausted also. So thank you for your time. We'll meet in the next class. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor.